Hello, my name is Carol May Whittick, spiritual life coach and your host of Her Conversations Tools for the Awakening. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. What is the awakening? This is the moment in time when humanity rises up out of the darkness. Who is awakening? Each one of us present on earth today, reclaiming our sovereignty, seeking greater possibilities in our reality, and looking for solutions. We know being awakened is not a lofty ideal, but a necessity. If we can transform ourselves, we can change the world. Guests on Her Conversations will speak to your spirituality, sensuality, and soul. Listen to their stories and hear how they are in service to the world. Let their words in these conversations embolden and inspire you. My guest this week is Sara Rae Hoaglund, a manifesting coach teaching mystical women to manifest on purpose by shattering their manifesting ceiling. She has a unique holistic full-phase approach to working with the law of attraction that is designed to act as a flexible roadmap to mindful manifesting. She also hosts a weekly podcast called Spiritually Inspired and has authored 4 books: Manifesting Abundance, Mindfulness Made Easy, Magical Moon Phases, and Practical Manifesting. During our conversation, Sara shares more about her manifesting process and how change is possible for us all, even in the face of the seemingly insurmountable challenges in today's society. So as always, I begin by asking my guests, HER is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. When do you feel that higher energetic resonance?
I feel it the most during Reiki, I think, when practicing either Reiki for myself or Reiki for clients or Reiki for the groups that I do.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second to that would probably be just like quiet meditation, very similar, like whether it's I'm channeling Reiki or not. But yeah, definitely when I'm tapping into the universal force energies when I feel it the most.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And before we go deeper into the conversation, I just want to ask you to share a little bit about your story and just how that evolved you and then into the work that you're doing today.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the opportunity to share. I was very fortunate in the sense that I grew up in a family that fully believed in all things spiritual and metaphysical. So unlike other psychic mediums, I never really went through a phase where I really hardcore repressed everything. I was never taught that what I was doing was evil. I was always very open. We did go to churches quite a bit growing up, and I really went to churches until I was in my early 20s. So God was always there and always present in my life. So he never really went away. And I never really fully repressed any of my intuition. So it's always been kind of slowly building over time. Some people feel like they have like an instant moment where like they spiritually awoke. I never really felt like that because I felt like it's always been there with me. It's always been my whole life. It's just been more like strides forward in time as opposed to like all of a sudden I saw something crazy and my whole life changed. Like it's never really been quite that dramatic for me, but it's been more of a lifelong thing. And my mom still is very spiritual. My sister is very spiritual. We talk about the spiritual things all the time. Like my sister has the most crazy pure paranormal experiences in her life. So I'm very fortunate in that regard to where it's never really been weird or taboo in my life. And I often forget that that is the way it is for other people. Right. So it's always been with me, always been part of me. And it wasn't really until I was in college trying to find myself, kind of like what we were just talking about, did I really discover crystals specifically and like how awesome they were, and then really started to dive into yoga and the zodiac signs and kind of all the opening doors, if you will, that a lot of people find into spirituality. And I kind of went all in all directions. You know how you get really obsessive. You're like, oh, I can't get enough yoga. I can't get enough crystals. I can't get enough astrology. This is just the most amazing thing ever. I can't get enough meditation. And I went really ham for a long time. And I didn't really know what to do with it all. So I was just like surface level interested in all these things, but I didn't know how to go deeper until I eventually started podcasting, and it helped me hone in on what it is that I wanted to focus on from a spiritual perspective, not only in like a business standpoint, because I knew God was always going to be God and creativity was always going to be part of my career. But I also knew that there were other people out there interested in similar things and needed help with similar things that I already knew about that I didn't think was that weird from people because I grew up with it. So that's kind of the direction that I ended up going in after 3 years of podcasting, where things that have always seemed normal and like second nature to me are mind-blowing to other people. And this is just godly stuff, right? It's connecting to the universe. It's hearing other voices in your head that aren't yours and not being freaked out by it and that sort of thing. Being able to channel universal energy. I honed all these skills over time, but really what got me to this point was realizing that what was normal for me wasn't normal for other people. And I want to normalize it. Like the whole spiritually inspired concept of my brand came from being spiritual in every moment and every day as much as you can, and not necessarily only being spiritual on your yoga mat or on your meditation cushion or while you're channeling Reiki or something, just making it a part of who you are. So that's what I try to embrace.
Beautiful. And I'm so with that as well. Like there's like so many similarities. I think we said this anyway. And with that, because like my background is like 100% the church. Like I was like a pastor's kid. I mean, you can't get more church centered than being, it's like royalty, you know?
Yeah, it is.
You've got like a huge amount of expectation on you when you're born into that position. And just life just kind of took us out of the church, you know? So we ended up not being in that church, and then my mom moved to a different church, and then my curiosity came from the fact that we moved denominations, but I saw that there was a similarity. So I came from a Pentecostal church, you know, like gospel music, speaking in tongues, testimony, noise, you know, the whole thing. And then after my father died, my mom kind of lost faith within the Pentecostal church, just because I think it was more to do with personalities than it was to do with the faith, because she kept her faith all her life. But she just moved into a Church of England church, which is very, very proper. Is, you know, you're kind of watching, if you've ever watched like a royal wedding or something like that.
Oh, of course, I've watched the royal weddings.
Yeah. So basically it's that kind of environment, you know, that very staid, very proper, very you know, you when you come from a Pentecostal church where it's noise and music and you know, there's no cap on how long the service lasts for, and then you go into a very buttoned down kind of environment, you're like, are we talking about the same thing here? You know, because it's like they're saying like we pray to God. I'm like, yeah, we did, but we made more noise. You know, so how can it be the same? Yeah, how can it be the same? And then
you don't hear people doing that often, switching denominations like that. That's unique to you.
Yeah, you know, and the thing is, it was only something that I thought of recently when someone else asked me, like, how my journey began. I'm like, why was I wondering? Because I've kind of come full circle, and I still have contact with like people who knew my dad when he was a pastor. So, you know, I've kind of spent, you know, the past few decades going around the world, going into different modalities, but noticing the common thread. And I think that's where I kind of came back into the whole thing and just went, actually, it's kind of, there's a similarity, and there's all these things that are different on the outside, but in the middle, there's that belief in something else. There's that wanting to be better people, have a bigger experience of the whole thing. So that's where
I came to a similar conclusion, because we grew up going to a Lutheran church, and then eventually I took myself to a Catholic church after my dad died, which I didn't realize that we had that in common as well. Although my father was not spiritual at all, not religious at all. His mother, my grandmother, was very, very religious. And that was kind of where we bonded, was over at the Catholic church. And we went to a Lutheran church. I mean,
what is a Lutheran church? I've never heard that.
It's very similar. The differences are minuscule. I can't give you a technical definition about Lutheran versus Catholic, but I do think it has to do with the way the rising happened. Maybe I'm not 100% sure, if I'm being honest. That was a very long time ago, but yeah, all you need to know is that they're very, very similar, just slightly different from each other. So they didn't vary that much. I guess the biggest difference was in the Catholic church, we had a male pastor, and then in the Lutheran church, we had a female pastor. I don't know if there was a different name for her or not. So that was probably the biggest difference I saw in my eyes, as opposed to like a gospel church versus the Church of London. Like that is a huge culture shock. Did it deter your faith at all, or did you just still feel like God was there?
I mean, I wondered, because I mean, because I was older when I went into the Church of England church. I was probably more engaged in it, in terms of I was like playing music. I mean, I did a little bit when I was in the gospel church, but then when I moved to the Church of England church, I was older, so I was a more accomplished musician, so I was kind of more involved in the choir and everything like that. So So I never really lost that. The only thing I just felt that there was, and I knew that the people there were earnest, so it wasn't taken away from their their beliefs or anything like that. I just wondered why they weren't like as animated. You know, it was almost like they'd hold themselves back. You know, so even when they were singing, you know, if they got a bit excited, they'd probably just rock back and forward on their toes and maybe get a bit higher. You know, and you just want to like let go, you know, it's like, it's okay. Because I'm used, you know, where I grew up was gospel music where you sing from your soul. You're not just trying to make something pretty. If anything, if you listen to like a good gospel singer, one that gets someone moved, they can just sing one note and sometimes it's not even pretty. It's just like a squall and it comes from their soul. And like you'll get an entire congregation will literally stand up and they're there already on one note, you know. That's the power of like a real soul connection. So I saw that I saw the Church of England was like trying to create something in terms of worship and people got a lot of things for it. I just felt there was a lot of repression there. And maybe that was just because I was doing the comparison, but it felt like compression because I'd been around people that just went, this is how I feel, you know, you can't get more free than speaking in tongues because it's it's improvisation, it's nonsense to the ear, but to that person, it's a connection and it's a channeling of, I don't know, I suppose the nearest we could say that it's similar to might be like a level of light language.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. A code of some kind. Yeah. But like you said, your soul receives it. I was getting spirit chills when you were talking about that. That's so cool. Yeah. Because I've definitely experienced that where I felt like in church was where I learned how to sing properly. And, you know, we were taught how to sing as if we were in a choir and we were just in the congregation. Like, why does it matter if I hit the right note if I'm just, you know, singing about God? So there were a lot of rules that I thought were not 100% necessary. But once I left the church, my faith just grew stronger. You know, I'm sure you had a similar experience to where there is a niceness to that structure, and being around other people is very powerful, especially in a big congregation. Like you mentioned, how you can all just feel that soul happening, but there are so many freaking rules and I don't have a problem with authority and rules. So that didn't really work out for me.
Ditto, you know, but I think, you know, if I think about when I never lost the respect for the church in terms of like having something in your life, because what I do recognize is if ever I'm around people that don't have any belief system, so it's not even like a religion of sort, but don't even like want to kind of cultivate a level of spirituality within themselves, they feel empty to me. I'm just like, how are you? What are you? You need that is like a curiosity to me, that you don't have anything. You've got no questions. What do you call on when you've got when you're going through stuff? You know, it's like whether I agree with it or not, like there needs to be like a core of something that's kind of pulling you through life. Is there not? So
I definitely agree.
Do you know what I mean? So that I've always kind of really recognized when people have just got like, they don't believe in anything. I'm like, okay, I don't even know where to go with the conversation. And it's not even like a judgment on that, because I want to sit and talk about spirituality. It's if I kind of try and connect with people who don't have a core of any belief system guiding them, I find that their view of the world is based on something else. You know, they don't seem to have a level of depth about them that just means that then, you know, we just don't connect on any level at all.
I totally agree. And they tend to be very sad people. They tend to feel like, what's the point? What is this for? Like, they're asking these big questions, but because for some reason they don't believe in a higher power for whatever reason, whether they're a really smart scientist or they just, you know, are not religious or spiritual in any regard, they feel an innate emptiness. I was actually just having this conversation with a client the other day because she felt that about her family. Like, she felt like she was the black sheep, or she was the only one that had faith and nobody else seemed to have faith. She called them all atheists, which is someone who doesn't believe in any sort of a higher power in any regard. So she was like, how can you simply not believe that? Like, there's evidence all around you. And she just was feeling very stuck. Whereas like the opposite of what we were just talking about, where you can feel a bunch of soul together when you all believe and connect with the same thing, but it can also be very draining if nobody believes it. And it's a hard life to live. Like, people don't realize that spirit side of you is such an important side of you. Like it hurts my heart when I hear people who don't believe in any kind of a human soul or any kind of a God and I'm not here to push my beliefs on people, and that's their journey. I believe that they will figure it out in their own time. But there's just so much unnecessary sadness or unnecessary questions, and you feel like you're kind of at the mercy and everything seems chaotic. And what a stressful way to live, to believe that everything is random and chaotic. I literally don't think I would have the brain capacity to believe that. Like, I have to believe for my own mental sanity that nothing is random. I don't believe in chaos theory. I believe everything has a divine purpose. There's no accidents. There's no chaos. There's a reason why there's a random piece of Post-it note sitting right here, right? Nothing is mistaken. And if I cannot fathom what that would be like to not have that sort of common thread in your life. Like, there's never been a point in my life where God wasn't there. So it's really hard for me to connect with those sort of people.
Yeah. Like I agree with you. I remember there was one time, he was a scientist actually, and he'd worked for like a major company for 30 or 40 years. And we were like friends on a level, like, you know, I'd always kind of see him when I went to this particular members bar in town. And I remember, I think he's since changed, because at one time we met up and he said he was doing yoga. So I'm like, okay, you know, because but at one point he'd said to me, oh, I don't believe in anything. It's like, when I die, we're gone. And I was just like, okay. It's like, is that what science does for you? But then having said that, I can see how certain elements of science are actually opening up and admitting,
absolutely.
and allowing themselves to be informed by it, you know, even if they want to, like, they need to write like a million white papers and have peer reviewed things, like, you know, if you need to write all this information to like validate what is just there in fact already, then, you know, waste your time or sit in it and believe in it and understand that you know, just take your brain out of the equation sometimes and just let yourself feel what is here already. For me, it was like, it was said full circle, like a few years back, I was just going through a time where the practices that I was doing at the time just didn't hit. You know, they just didn't feel deep enough. And the thing that got me back was listening to gospel music and just listening to gospel music and letting it all come out. And there's just something about that music. There's something about the chord progressions. There's something about the way that people come together. There's something about the whole feel of that music and that expression without the politics. Because then if you look at the industry, then it becomes an industry and you've got all the politics. But at the core of it, the pure core of it is just pure connection and pure expression, which ultimately I think is what spirituality is all around the board, is connection and expression. And we just kind of bring those other things into it to kind of make it real or not real.
I like how this conversation went to religion and science, because that is so cool. Because in particular, I was just doing research for an upcoming episode that I'm doing about Reiki for my own podcast, because I wanted to look into some more like scientific peer-reviewed studies. There aren't a lot, of course, but there are several that point to interesting implications in their data. And it's neuroscience and quantum physics in particular that are making huge strides in spirituality, but they're not calling it that. They're usually calling it mindfulness. So just know that that's the key word. That's the key word, mindfulness. But it is happening everywhere. It's happening. Scientists, extreme scientists and extreme religious people are probably like the most closed-minded people ever, but the right in the middle, like the open-minded scientists that say, you know what, there clearly is something going on here that we can't quite measure yet, or the people who are spiritual be like, you know, I don't really want to be in the confines of the church, but I know there's something going on here. That's our people. Those are the people who are really waking up and helping humanity ascend to the next level.
Yeah, please God, you know. I think there's always been those like the people that kind of introduced me to the overlap. And, you know, just to even like kind of take like a beat back, it's like one of my most favorite subjects at school was physics. I always found physics out of all of them to be super fascinating, you know, and I clearly never followed through on it as a career. It was never that. It was just like I understood and I appreciated the kind of digging into the wires of things. But then I really got into listening to a lot of like Bruce Lipton and Greg Braden and those guys, and just kind of seeing how they'd come from like very staunch like 20-30 year careers in science, but then allowed themselves to kind of like blend the two in the middle and speak out openly about them. And it was just, you know, it just made so much sense. It always has. Like, similar to you, I've never had a moment of awakening. There was never this like, oh my God, the world looks different. You know, all it's been is just like layers of understanding. It's always been there. But something popped into my mind as well when we're talking about kind of spirituality and science or religion is years ago when The Secret first came out. And I remember watching it, and this, like, I'd gone to see my aunt in Miami, and a friend of hers had it on DVD. So we watched this movie, The Secret, and it's all about, you know, manifesting and calling your things
with your thoughts.
Yeah. And I was going through a period of time where, even before I'd made this trip, that I was reading certain books. I was really into Maxwell Maltz psychocybernetics and Wallace Wattles and all that kind of stuff. So I've been reading all of these things. So clearly I was open to it. And on one of the days, I'd gone and watched The Secret at a friend of my aunt's. And then that weekend we went to church, because she had like a little church that we went to. And I can't for the life of me remember what the preacher said, but he said a Bible verse that might as well have been written in The Secret. And it was the same. And I was just like, bing, the two came
mind
together.
Blown.
Exactly.
That is so cool.
I'm like, oh, so they're connected, you know. So you can see. So all of this kind of, you know, like, because we wanted to talk about manifestation in particular with yourself, is just realizing that all of this has always been part of the conversation. It's always been there, that always asking it will be given to you, and, you know, all of this kind of stuff. So how are you finding then that people are more open to the idea of being in control of their reality and being able to manifest on a real level? Because The Secret kind of opened the doors a little bit, but, you know, it did good.
It's incomplete.
It did some stuff, you know. You know what I'm saying? But it kind of opened the door to the wider conversation, I think.
It absolutely did. Yeah. It really did. I do think that book, as crazy as this might sound to some people who aren't religious or spiritual, but I do think that book came at the exact right time. It came into the collective consciousness and made the waves that it did to help be the catalyst for the awakenings that we're experiencing now, like 20 years later. Because it came out in the early 2000s, if I recall correctly.
Something like that,
Yeah, and it was a movie and a book, and I believe there is a second book by Rhonda Burns, I believe her name is. You know what? It is a great book. I definitely read it. I just don't want anyone to think that that's the only book, the only answer, because it does leave a lot of questions where they go, okay, well, that's great and all, and I can think about stuff, but to use Carol May's words, it's Tuesday and I have to do Tuesday shit, so I can't just think about my dream life all the time, right? So yeah, I do think there's a lot more going on here, and people are starting to realize, because they see things like The Secret, even if it isn't The Secret specifically, they see things that are teaching similar things. Because as we mentioned, everything is very basically the same thing, right? Just different ways of speaking about it. People are realizing that they can make a difference in their own lives. They're realizing that they have so much more control and influence over their lives than they've been originally taught to have, or that they originally thought that they'd had, just based off of intuition and fight or flight response and all that stuff. So people are not only realizing that it's true, but they kind of want to have more control. So they're looking for it a little bit more. I think in recent years, not even just since the pandemic, but even slightly before that too, over the last like 5 or 6 years, people have really been wanting to find that level of control in their own life and influence in their own life, because they don't want to live in a world where God doesn't exist. Like, they might not phrase it that way, but I truly think that that's what it boils down to, is that we don't want to live in a world of chaos. We don't want to live at the mercy of the randomness of the universe. And we don't want to believe that the miraculousness of this massive universe is by frickin' chance. Like, there's just no way. It just doesn't make sense to people. So people are opening up because they want things to make sense. And when you read things like The Secret, when you learn about manifesting, you learn about the neuroscience of how your thoughts create your reality, and the fact that it is literally impossible not to influence the outcome of a particular thing through your thoughts. That has been scientifically proven. People are realizing, well, if that's true, then everything I've been told is a lie, which is a spiritual awakening. And now I need to learn with a new way of being, a new way of creating my life. And this does create a lot of fear, because fear of change, fear of is this even real? Or what if this is wrong and God punishes me? That sort of fear. So it either seems to stir up a lot of fear in people or a lot of like inspiration in people. It might be a little bit of both. Like you might be afraid and inspired at the same time, but it's creating a lot of influence and, what is the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say turmoil or tension, but just a lot of like upset, like the things are getting tossed around a little bit in the zeitgeist, in the conscious collective. And it's a good thing. I think we want to shake up the world a little bit, because if we just stayed complacent, if we just were willingly sheep throughout the rest of humanity, we would never progress. We wouldn't have even gotten here as a collective if people stayed complacent. Part of the research I was doing for, learning a little bit more about the scientific things about Reiki and studies that have been happening was to see who persevered throughout time, like who 100 years ago was saying, hey, there's something to this Reiki thing, and everyone going, no, that's stupid, and them going, I don't care, I'm figuring it out anyway, and then laying the foundation. I really do believe that is adding to everyone else's growing interest. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, there's so much there. And I think also the level of complacency that has managed to kind of like last up until this point has brought us to this point as well. But luckily it's not being like 100% of complacency. There's always been that undercurrent of people that are just going, no, we're not buying this. There's got to be
radicals.
Yeah, exactly. The ones
I'm so grateful for those ones that they never gave up.
Yeah, and then suddenly when you kind of like go into what other people are speaking about and really understand, one, it shifts the world, but it also brings the power back to you as well. I think sometimes, like you say, there's all these fears, especially when it comes to like thoughts creating things as well. Like I don't know if you've heard this or you've got thoughts on this, especially when it comes to, how people can, that spirituality can kind of veer or kind of get meshed up with new age stuff,
Yes.
And that kind of like that love and light mentality where I don't really want to kind of get into work, doing any kind of deeper like introspection and work as well, or don't want to kind of think about anything dark or bad because they think they're going to like suddenly like manifest it. So it's better to just stay on the love and light kind of things without really dealing with what's going on around. And that's, that kind of love and light and kind of pushing back on people going, well, if you're looking at this negative stuff or you're asking questions about the world or you're seeing other things, you're just going to like manifest that, and I want to just kind of have fluffy bells and rainbows and unicorns and who doesn't, but like that's not where we're at the minute. And we're going through the bit where we clean everything up, but also be able to look at things and also be able to look at things and see that just by looking at something and acknowledging it doesn't mean that you're just going to manifest a world of it as well. It doesn't necessarily work like that. You can have your attention on something, but have control of the way that things turn up in your life. And I think that there needs to be more clarity about how much power we have. It's like I think a lot of things have been allowed to manifest because we've just kind of been complacent in what we're taking in and what we're allowing to come out the other side because we believe that we're powerless. And that's how powerful you are, is like you can convince yourself that you have no power when you do. When you see the twisty turny of it and the kind of like convoluted language about who you think you are, it's like you only think you're weak because you've convinced yourself that you're weak. You can literally turn it 180.
Yeah, absolutely. You made so many good points there. And to that, I say everything in moderation. There is truth to everything that the new age people are saying. Speak positively, stay in that positive mindset. I think all of that is totally valid. But what the problem comes in is when you go too far in that direction, when you begin repressing the unpleasant things that you don't want to deal with, where you begin avoiding things that are unpleasant and you just use it as a form of escapism. That is too far in the other direction. But I do think building up the habit of noticing your negative thoughts and switching to a positive mindset is really good for beginners. Is really good for people who have never, ever once tried to examine their own thoughts, who think they're powerless, who believed in the chaos and all of this stuff for that long, I think that's a really good exercise to do, to notice that you have control over your thoughts. But once you start realizing that you can change your thoughts, that's when we start digging a little bit deeper. I call that the catching it red-handed technique. Not a very unique name, but I'm not really in the creative business in that way. But really what I teach my clients to do is you catch yourself red-handed thinking the thoughts. You go, oh my God, I'm so ugly and fat. Stop. I'll go, you know what? You state the exact opposite. Say, you know what? I am beautiful and healthy. I don't really want to use the word skinny, but I'm beautiful and healthy. And you do that consistently. And that starts to open you up to essentially everything that the secret teaches, which is your thoughts can change your reality and your thoughts create your reality. There's a really beautiful quote that I am obsessed with right now. It is called "Life is Images of the Mind Expressed," from the book called Happy Pocket Full of Money. I'm forgetting the full name of the person who wrote it, but the last name I believe is it's not Gandhi, but it's like Gandhi or something. I forget the author, but the book is A Happy Pocket Full of Money. The quote is, "Life is images of the mind expressed. It is the effect, not the cause. What you see around you is the consequence, not the root. So the root is your thoughts." So yes, I do think that there is something to be said about the positive thinking, but we do have to do deeper work eventually. We cannot shy away from the deeper work eventually, forever, because eventually it will cause problems, because that's ultimately what's manifesting. Your ego thoughts aren't really manifesting. It's what I call your energetic blueprint. That's what's manifesting around you. And your energetic blueprint is your limiting beliefs, your shadow side, your aura, your chakras, your current mindset, everything that you've gathered energetically speaking up until this point encompasses your energy blueprint. And that's what we work to shift when we change our mindsets, when we practice Reiki, when we do meditation, and we do coaching sessions and we have tarot readings. That's ultimately what we're working to shift, is our energy mindset. And there's all kinds of ways to do this. We mentioned a few already: inner child work, crystal Reiki, all of that stuff. There's countless ways to go about changing your energy blueprint, but you have to do that inner work. But you can't do that inner work if you don't even realize that that's a thing. You just simply don't know what you don't know. So all that to say that it's a good place to start. The places like The Secret are really powerful places to start. But many people do feel like just the thoughts are incomplete. And that's kind of why I started doing what I'm doing, is everything that you mentioned. People are missing half the story. And I felt that very strongly. And that's why I kind of transitioned eventually into focusing mainly on manifesting in my work, because we're never not manifesting. It's always happening. You can manifest instantly. It's 100% possible. But most people aren't quite there yet because they don't even realize that that's a thing. I've realized since doing this work that people think that manifesting is like yoga, where you do yoga, right? But as you know, with yoga, you don't just do the asanas. Yoga is a whole life philosophy, and manifesting is very similar. The working with the law of attraction isn't just writing in your journal and creating a vision board. It is working through all the blocks, all the manifesting ceilings that the universe is showing you, so that you can expand and change what it is that you are creating in your life, because your life is images of the mind expressed. So in order to change the life around you, you have to change the images in your mind, your energetic blueprint.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. And it's and what I like about it is then it puts it back in your hands.
Yes,
you stop
absolutely.
being like, oh my God, the world is against me and everyone's this and all. It's like, well, if that I think the head noodle, or the trick to kind of get around initially, is that if that's what you believe, then that's what you're going to see,
Yes.
So people will that's, I think, where that, the beginning part is always the harder part to get out of, is kind of maneuvering out of a tight parking spot, you're like, but look, that's the way it is. And that's the way it is because that's the way you think it is. Yes. Yeah, but that's the way it is. But that's the way it is because that's the way you think it is. And
it's a huge illusion.
Because you keep going around in circles until the penny drops where you're like, oh, that's the way it is because that's the way I think it is. And the minute that you shift the emphasis on it, even though it doesn't sound any different than what you've been saying before, then you start to see that it is actually different than what you've been saying before.
Yeah.
And to mirror what you said as well, I don't know if you've ever delved into Neville Goddard's stuff. It's a lot of his thing, and one of his phrases is everything in the world is you pushed out, so you're almost like you're kind of creating the simulation outside of you, and that's another rabbit hole to go down.
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, you change your thoughts first in order to change the world around you. You don't change the world around you in order to change your thoughts. It's actually the other way around.
Yeah. It's so good. And I think it's a lot of work on the mind, because we don't get told to think like this. We don't get educated to think like this. You kind of spend the formative years of your life being indoctrinated into a way of suppressing everything that you think is magical about yourself. So then in order to kind of undo and backpedal that, you have to let go of a lot. And also, I think as well, let go of the ego that just wants to hold on to the identity that you've built around the ideals that you were given, and admit that you were taken down the wrong direction, and not spending too much time in blame or shame or anything like that. Just get out, get over it, move on, and start creating what we want going forward.
Right.
But
what you just touched on there is so important, where people create the personality around parts of themselves that they've deemed acceptable or unacceptable. And the unacceptable parts become the shadow parts of themselves. And they're terrified to dig those things up because they've labeled them as unacceptable for whatever reason, whether it's unacceptable for you, or maybe it was unacceptable for somebody in your life. Therefore, it's really hard and really scary for people to start doing this work, because they're afraid to meet their minds, because in some way they feel like they're unworthy. And even if you feel like, I don't struggle with worthiness, I know my self-worth, I know I can do. Ultimately, I feel like everyone can really work on fully accepting themselves, saying every part of you is worthy, because it makes it so much easier to unrepress those parts of yourself that get repressed in the formative years, as you mentioned. Like that happens to everybody. Everybody gets repressed. They do things, no matter how wonderful and caring and supportive your parents are. There's going to be at some point in your life, something's going to get repressed because you deem it as unacceptable. But the spiritual work is taking a look at those things that we think are unacceptable and digging deeper into that. Where did that come from? Is this a karma thing? Is this a limiting belief thing? Like, why did this happen? And then that's our expansion opportunity. And then we can grow, and thus, a domino effect, change everything in your life and the world around you, make the world a better place, and, die happy.
Yeah. And I think also to believe that it's possible, because, like where we are at the moment in the world is like everything looks like so topsy-turvy, so dark, so divided, so everything negative. But I think that we're getting to the point of like, I don't know how ridiculous it's going to get before we're just like, okay, stop. But I'm seeing more and more, I kind of look at different forums and different areas and listen to different people in kind of different spaces talk, and the conversation is kind of the same. Maybe the language is different, like, from me going from a Pentecostal church to a Church of England church, maybe the conversation around it is the same, but the expression is different, but the expression of it is still the same. And it's very much people going, this world is crazy. We can't continue to do this. We can't have this. And, so I'm hearing the same kind of thing being said in different spaces, and also a similarity in people wanting to move away from externalizing everything that we want, move away from externalizing our authority, move away from externalizing how we educate ourselves, move away from externalizing even to the point of like, where are we getting our food from, what monetary, really being able to change the world. And so many different communities are saying exactly the same thing in their own language, where they're just like, it's getting mad now, or they're like, hang on a minute, why do we hate that group of people? It doesn't make sense. I think that's to me one of the biggest lies ever told, is this kind of divide between race. It's like the biggest lie there. I won't subscribe to it. And it causes a lot of kind of pushback. You can imagine, as a Black woman, I'm like, well, why am I not feeling what I'm being told that I should feel? Like, because I don't see life like that. And I'm not disregarding that externally I look different from you, but I've traveled and I've met people from all different corners of the world. And I always try and like find the soul. I'm like poking your soul. I want to find out who you are underneath it all. And externally we've kind of like gone into different cultures and we like different things, and music and move different and everything like that. But underneath the core of it all, like I said, I'm listening to lots of different groups talk about the world right now, and they're saying the same thing. The only bit that they haven't yet decided to do is really just kind of push back and like rise up in whatever way that is going to manifest itself, you know. And I think it's going to be a peaceful way. I think we just need to get to the point where people are really, really over it. We're closer than ever before.
I would say that as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what are you seeing as well?
Your experience mirrors mine exactly in the race conversation, in the economy conversation, in the parenting conversation, in the religion, everything. I have come to realize in my almost 31 years that we all believe and want pretty much the exact same things. Like, of course, there are differences in beliefs, right? But at the end of the day, most people believe and want essentially the same things. We're all having very similar conversations. So yeah, my experience pretty much mirrors yours exactly as far as noticing the same conversations happening before. And I also hear from a lot of other Black people saying that they don't want to prescribe to this race narrative that they're being told. And then they experience like a lot of outsiderness, like they kind of get shunned a little bit. I don't know if that's your experience, but I see this happening to people, and people will tell me about that. This is what's happening, that when they don't prescribe, this is just the race is just an example. When they don't prescribe to the collective belief of the people around them, they get thrown out as an outsider, and that hurts really bad. And that causes more repression. You're either going to repress all the parts of yourself that don't align with that narrative and just live the most inauthentic life possible, or you're going to bust through very similar to what you're doing and, you know, shake up the status quo, vibrate all the foundations and destroy everything that's already been built. So it seems to go in either direction. You're either really motivated by what you see, or you're really demotivated by what you see. And that's your choice. That's your spiritual choice in this life. Are you going to be demotivated or be motivated?
Yeah. And to like kind of like respond to the race psyop. It's so tiring. Even just mentioning it just like exhausts me. But the reason I think there's a lot of pushback on it, especially from my own community or from the ones that will push back, is because there is a level of unhealedness that is like you're going against. Is if you imagine the cult is the same as the family, the same as any kind of group that you ascribe to, that will then you get to a point where you have to push the that where your shadows get built because you're suppressing a part of yourself, because there's part of you that's going like, I don't agree with it, but I still need to be part of this collective. So you suppress the part of you that is telling you what would get you out of it and pushes you back. So it just, because it gets so weaponized, because because it looks so righteous and because it looks so good, you know, the way that we kind of like carve things up and call them inclusion and diversity. We shouldn't have to have words like this. It's so unnecessary. Like, you know, like, don't even get me on the soapbox.
This is so powerful. But Carol, I have to say thank you for saying this and for talking about this. Go ahead. I don't want to interrupt you, but oh my gosh, this is so powerful.
But it's one of those things where I look at and I can see how if people aren't necessarily really deeply thinking about it, then it looks like a good thing. It's like, you know, we've been oppressed, we've been suppressed for so many years, and now there's all of this thing. But like, you know, we've been trying to do this for 40, 50, 60 years and it's still not working. So if it didn't work back then, why are we still playing the same playbook? It's not worked. You know, like it's not worked. So it's not going to work by still calling other people the other. You don't include people by pointing out their otherness. It just doesn't happen. It's like common sense will tell you the thing. But because it gets so weaponized, then anytime that you can highlight an instance that you will immediately identify with on an external level, you feel it because you haven't healed that wound. So it's going to be like, oh, another thing that's happened that's against me, it's against my race, it's against all of that. If you see yourself from the core and you recognize the game that's being played to keep triggering you, then you won't buy into it. And even though everyone's like, yeah, but can't you see what they're doing to us? It's like, no, that you're buying into the story. That's what it is. You pull back. It's not that at all. And more people are moving away from it, but there's still a core group that will still stay with it, but also there's still a core group that are too afraid to move away. So you know, the core group seems larger at the moment solely because the people, there are always people on the fringes who don't necessarily believe anything that's going on, but they'll just kind of follow the crowd because they don't really have that courage, in whatever. But I think that's that's going to be like one of the last big bastions of for people to go, no, just literally no, we're not doing it. Because the only way that gets perpetuated is by people in power and like millionaire black people telling everyday black people they're oppressed. It's like, but you're a black millionaire. How can that possibly be?
I'm so glad you said it because I was not in a position to say it. but for real though,
like I just can't continue to have people who live in massive houses tell me how crappy my life is.
Good for you, Carol.
My life is not crap. I'm sorry.
You are amazing
things, but I'm not buying this division anymore. We can't move forward this way. It's impossible.
I agree. I'm snapping like we do at poetry readings for clapping because what you're saying is amazing. So many people need to hear this right now. I am so thankful that you have the courage to speak out about this. This is definitely not what we were going to be talking about today, but you have the courage to speak about this very, very important topic. It's been going on. It's in our collective mind way more than it has been in recent years. And there is a very strong narrative that if you don't follow this narrative, you are the problem. And I felt like I wasn't allowed to believe anything else. It felt like how people must have felt in church growing up to me, how if I believed anything different, even though people like you directly telling me a different experience. So it's not like I'm just like coming up with something based on my own experience. I'm like trying to learn from other people's experience and they're telling me something different than what everyone else is supposedly experiencing. It creates a lot of conflict. So keep it up, Carol. I know you've been podcasting for a long time and I know you talk about this on a regular basis, but yeah, I just think it's very empowering and you are the ringleader.
But also I want to say it's unfortunate that you as a white woman, I just even hate saying that, feel that you can't even say anything. That's how stupid it's got now. So that you can't even think, well, this is what I think, but dare I say it because I haven't got the right skin tone, I haven't come. It's a absolute 100% nonsense, and we can't move forward as spiritual beings playing this division game. It's never going to work. It hasn't worked. It's not going to work. I just it goes beyond and so-called intelligent people that I have to try and have this conversation with that will still go, but I went through this. I'm like, I went through the same thing, just I experienced the whole thing until I decided that me getting upset with people all the time was going to solve a problem, or me walking around expecting myself to experience racism was going to solve any problem or validate the way that I thought. All it does is highlight you and keep you in a hypervigilant state. So with any kind of trauma, if you're always kind of thinking on the experience of your own trauma, and you keep getting reminded that you went through that trauma all the time, you're hypervigilant. So anything that you see that doesn't kind of meet they didn't smile at me, they looked at me funny, they didn't give me the thing, it's just going to reaffirm that someone is against you. And it might not. Everyone's got their own shit, man. Most people are just trying to get through their day. They really are.
For real.
So, I'll get off my soapbox because
Carol, actually, this is so important, Carol, because I think this fits right into manifesting. Because often the biggest objection I face from people is, okay, well, what about the system? Systemic racism, classes, all the stuff. And I do say, yes, those things exist. I don't want to discount your experiences. I'm not denying the fact that the system, especially in the United States, I can't speak for England, but in the United States, it was built with racist minds in mind. I cannot deny that. Right. But the thing is that is just words on paper. God is stronger than words on paper, but I, like you mentioned, I am, for some reason, I'm not really in a position. People don't want to listen to me. People who let me rephrase. Lots of people don't want to listen to me because they feel like I'm ignoring an important part of the manifesting process, which is the very real limitations of the real world out there because of skin tones and even because of genders too. So I know you're the one interviewing me supposedly for this podcast, but I would love to know.
This is called conversations, so it goes backwards and forwards.
Yeah. I really would love to hear from your perspective, how, again, you're in a different country, but I don't really think that matters. do you experience those sort of systemic hardships and manifesting, or when you changed your thinking, did it really even matter anymore? Like, what do you think about that?
Britain, the UK is trying very hard to be America, you know, in terms of the keeping the division lines, and then bringing this whole kind of inclusion and diversity. They sound so good. These words sound so nice, you know, like they sound positive and yummy, but then they create this underlying, it's not it just isn't. And I don't even know, I think I went through a stage where like I just grew up in my life, and also because I came from a predominantly Black church, and then worshipped and went to school with, where I was the minority in school, but I didn't necessarily really feel like I was a minority. I didn't really appreciate that. There were a couple experience that. There were a couple of instances, like one in particular, where I did have a racist maths teacher, and he kind of made this slur and everyone laughed and everything like that, you know.
Wow.
So, you know, so I remember that, but I don't kind of go around with it as a chip on my block. Like, unfortunately for me, because I kind of took a stand against it, and I just decided I'd turn up to his class. I wasn't going to fight back, because not really me. The way that I decided to rebel in his class was just sit there and read magazines. I wasn't going to do any work, you know. So
that's the way to do it.
So that was it. But what happened is eventually he apologized to me, but they moved me down a class. So the class that I was in was actually the highest set, which meant I could do a different exam that would get me a higher grade. Sure. So I kind of shot myself in the foot. But then, you know, I left school years ago, and like, who uses maths? So like, who lost? Not me. You know
Nobody uses math.
Not maths as you're taught in school. Like, you know, if they'd have taught me like how to really work out taxes and stuff like that, I might have listened, but you know, not relevant. Don't use algebra, don't use averages, you know, none of that stuff matters in real life. So I just kind of got on with my life. And also because I then started to move through lots of different spiritual modalities and groups. I traveled to Bali and India and all over. So I was always looking for something and not noticing if anything was happening around me in terms of people discriminating against me. There were instances that I remember, but it was just like, okay, right, you know, water for duck's back for the most part. And the only time that I really kind of got really pulled back into it was about 3 or 4 years ago, when I started to read the books that I thought I should have read, because I'm like, you know,
I can imagine.
Yeah. And I was just like, well, maybe I'm not, you know, maybe I'm not kind of like Black enough, you know. And I went through this stage of just going, well, maybe I've kind of missed them, maybe I'm not experiencing stuff, because I just wasn't going with the movement, you know, and how hard it had got. So I read a few books, and I started following a few people on social media, names that I needn't mention. And I just then noticed it brought up this kind of latent underlying anger in me, and this hypervigilance that I that wasn't my personality, that never is my personality, you know. I'm a Scorpio, and I'll get you and I'll kill you when I don't walk
like the darkness a little bit.
But I don't walk around like eyes peeled waiting for the next instance and example of that stuff to throw up. And then after a while, when I noticed that about myself, that there'd been this shift in my personality, my experience, I dropped it, and I heavily dropped it. And I really kind of saw the play on the whole thing when the George Floyd incident happened about 3 years
in my hometown ago. That happened not far from me. Yep.
Oh wow. So it was just seeing how that really reflected, and sitting back and looking at things, because at that point I was really just trying to like understand American politics more so than I'd even tried to understand British politics, because there was just this mad play going on. And I was like, what the hell is going on here, you know? So I started to just see it from all different aspects. And then also when the BLM movement and that whole thing came over to the UK, I'm like, why are we bringing that over here? You know, like, you know, it's not that we don't care about things. It's like, but why is it so prevalent? Why is it on the street? Why are kids who are supposedly afraid of the, you know, catching COVID going in the park and screaming and shouting? It's like things didn't make sense.
Yes.
And then
when weird time.
Yeah. You know, when we think back to it. So then when I started to look back and went, hang on a minute, what if I decide to just like to not playing to the racism thing. And that came to me in a meditation. It was like, what if I just don't buy it? That, it was just as simple of like, what if I don't buy it? Because we were so many people were like kind of digging down rabbit holes and looking at things that were true and not true. I'm like, well, what if this isn't completely as true as we've been led to believe? Because if we don't turn on the TV and buy the magazines and read the books and follow the people on social media and just get on with the people around us, are we hating them? And the racism, the idea of racism comes from the information we're fed from the external. From the heart outwards, we're not that, but externally we are. So yeah, maybe you go to a country and people are racist, but maybe those racist people tune into TV like all day long, read the right books, and it's coming from the outside in.
Yep. Because I know some genuinely racist people who they read all the books, or no, they don't read books. They watch the specific news channels and follow the specific people. Yeah. And there definitely are people who hate people just because of their skin color. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but like you phrased it so eloquently. It's an external influence. Like that is not our default setting. And I've said many times that, more in the context of feminism, but like my husband and my brothers and my grandpas and my uncles, they don't hate me because I'm a woman. It's the people at large telling us that we're having problems that are really causing the problems, that are, stirring up these problems, so that we stay distracted, so that we stay divided, so that we're not waking up to the real issues, which the biggest and only issue we really should care about is climate change, in my opinion. And then the second one is the class system. Like really, it's the wage gap that's creating the divide more than anything else. But they want you to believe it's other things for sure. And this is kind of going down the rabbit hole of the higher power, the Illuminati, if you will, a little bit, but it's true. Like all of this does circle back to manifesting, I think, because like I mentioned, that was one of the biggest objections I would get from people, specifically minorities, where they say, well, you're ignoring half of this, or I can't manifest this because the system is this way.
Right.
But you are such a powerful example. I'm kind of regretting of the topic choice that we picked for my podcast now. Maybe some other time we can dig into this a little bit more, because I think this is such an important conversation to be having, especially since the way you described it can be applied to literally anything, not just racism. It could be applied to feminism. It can be applied to religion, to school, to any type of hive belief that you don't want to buy into anymore. You just don't. You just stop. You just drop it like hotcakes. Your life is images of the mind expressed. So if you don't believe it, it's not going to manifest for you. And then eventually your energy blueprint will change so much that it will be impossible for you to experience it, because that resonance will not resonate with your energy. So then those are the people who be like, what are you talking about? I literally don't see racism anywhere. I literally don't see, anti-women things anywhere, because they just don't have that energy match, or they're just repressing super hard. We're not talking about those sorts of people. We're talking about the high vibe people. So
yeah, exactly.
Thank you for talking about that.
No, it's because it's just because I see how it's like the heat is being turned up on it all the time. And it always comes back down to spirituality. I would be doing a disservice to be out there calling myself a spiritual life coach and then going around with all this hang up, because I'm talking to people to get them in contact with their core as who they are as spiritual beings. As a spiritual being, do you buy this shit? And if you do, then you have to kind of ask yourself, like you're saying about manifestation, if you see it, then you'll see it. You will see it. But you have to really keep asking yourself, who is informing these people? Where are they getting their information from? If I go and I, sit at the foothills of the Himalayas, and I actually haven't been, we drove up actually, but
cool.
So if you've been to the Himalayas and there's some yogi that sat there for like 30, 40 years just in meditation and turns around and decides that I'm a problem because of the color of my skin, then maybe there's something in it. But someone who is removed from all of this stuff doesn't see it that way. So that means it's not true. If it was true, it would be like a complete 100-degree and 100% belief system, and it isn't, which means it's a lie. It's not hard. If you break it down like that, it's not a hard thing to take on board. If it's not a blanket agreement, then it's a lie, and it's been implanted, and some people are buying it, but slowly people are going, it's not serving us, it's not helping any of us move forward.
I
So,
totally agree. And I see that happening. I can see it happening, unfolding in people. Spirit has been going crazy in my ear this entire time you've been talking, by the way. Like, this is such an important conversation. Yeah. It's so great. And I really just want to emphasize that all that you're saying can apply to any belief. Any belief at all, not just racism. And that's just the most prominent one right now, I think, that has come up in our conversation.
Yeah, I want to leave it back to you to just kind of like close out and give some manifestation and manifesting like gems and because, you know, this the reason it comes out so much, like people probably like bored of hearing me saying it, is because I just feel that like I have to keep voicing it, you know. And it's not an easy thing to voice because so many people want to, you know, have got evidence of the opposite, but are not asking the questions like, who is shaking the jar, who's feeding all of this? Because as long as, like you say, as long as we keep looking at it and buying into it, we manifest it. So we can turn it around. And it's, you know, it doesn't take away from our stories and our experiences, because we experience as a result of everyone else buying into it and being brainwashed into the idea that that was the thing. But we can, you know, pull the blinkers back from our eyes. But let me leave it with you as well. I'm going to shut up now.
No, I absolutely agree. This has been great. Absolutely great. So everything that you said is totally valid. That you were talking about what I call the mindset shifting phase of manifesting. You were doing the deeper work. You were thinking about it. You're contemplating it. You're comparing the thoughts and the narrative to what you're actually experiencing. I call all of that the mindset shifting phase. And the way I approach manifesting is a 4-phase approach. I don't like to say steps because the idea is that it's interchangeable. I envision it as like a 4-point scale. We almost always do start with mindset shifting because, as I kind of mentioned towards the beginning, that is a really good place to start, is noticing your mind, your thoughts. That's a very empowering position to be in. And our goal is to keep all these phases in balance. So when you're working to mindfully manifest, because you're always manifesting, when you're doing it mindfully, you're kind of working through these 4 different things at a time to create the perfect environment for your energetic blueprint to change so that you can change what it is that you're manifesting. And I do tend to list them in this order, although there's no really real order. So mindset shifting, and then intuitive planning, but only about 10%. Only just like enough to get the manifesting ball rolling. That's when you're tapping into your intuition. You're saying, what is my big vision? You're forgetting about the cars and the houses and the material things. You're really looking for like, what is it, the feeling that I want? And then you're going, okay, how do I get there? How do I, my vision is up here and I'm here currently. How do I bridge that gap? That's what intuitive planning is all about. You begin working on bridging that gap. And then taking action, inspired action is the next phase, which is something The Secret never mentions. Is the word action even in that book? I don't even think so. I don't even know. But that's a lot of the problems people have with The Secret, is that there's not enough taking action. And a lot of the people who bring me on their podcast say, we need to talk about how you need to take action to manifest things, because there is this belief that you can just think your way to changing your life. And I'm not here to tell you that that's not true. It is 100% possible to change your life simply through your thoughts alone. It's just a big challenge. That's advanced spirituality, if you will, advanced manifesting, if you will. So most of us need to take inspired action. And that inspired action, surprisingly, can literally be anything. It does not have to be in alignment with what it is you want to manifest at all. It's just, sometimes I do inspired action on my jigsaw puzzles. Because it's just like a puzzle that's just out in the living room for the family to work on, like as we go. And sometimes I'll be thinking about something and I just like really need a break. So I'll just like work on my puzzle and holding my intention in my heart, because my puzzle's kind of mindless. It keeps my hands busy, but it helps me like think about what it is that I want to do. So inspired action, intentional action in any regard is very important. And then the 4th phase, the 4th point on the scale, is letting go. In other words, surrender, trust, knowing that the universe has your back. And this is why we only plan 10%, because we need the universe to have enough room to work its magic, right? If you plan 100%, not only does that take a lot of time, but then you have tunnel vision. You go, this very specific outcome means that I've succeeded. And if it's not that specific outcome, then I failed. But manifesting is not a pass-fail situation. Goal setting is pass or fail. And we incorporate goal setting techniques into mindful manifesting with my clients, but we're mainly working to just like let go and let God and surrender and trust. This big word surrender is really important. And this is also where what I call the inevitability factor comes in a little bit, where you have to trust and know in your heart of hearts, like you know anything else in the world, that your manifestation is real and happening now. Quantum physics tells us that all timelines and possibility are happening in this moment now, which means that there is a version of yourself somewhere out there in the timelines that has what you want to manifest happening now. So you need to bring that to you now. That is the inevitability factor. That is the letting go phase. So mindset shifting, intuitive planning, inspired action, and letting go. That's what it takes to mindfully manifest. All of that brought together. And I speak about this constantly, similar to what you said. Like, I feel like I just need to keep voicing this over and over and over again, because there is so much missing information. I don't want to say misinformation when it comes to manifesting, although that's out there too. It's more like it's just incomplete. Like there's just a whole nother side of it that can be really empowering, because some people really have a hard time changing their mind, and they read things like The Secret and they go, okay, all I have to do is change my thoughts. And they think they can't change their thoughts. And then they get really discouraged saying, well, I can't change my thoughts, therefore I can't change my life and manifest. And manifesting isn't for me, as if it were something that you can, like a diet that you can just put on, like a try on. But manifesting is never not happening. You are always manifesting. That is why we do the spiritual work to change your energetic blueprint so you can change what it is that you're manifesting. And the 4 phases I just described is basically the framework that I bring my clients through to change their energetic blueprint, to change what it is that they're manifesting.
And it's fun. After a while, it gets to become fun.
Absolutely.
Once you get your head around it. And I think also in those early days, there was very much about, your vision boards, and you say some words and then you just kind of don't make, or you just kind of wait for the fairies to bring it to you as well. Like, the
fairies aren't bringing you crap. They're going to take shit if anything.
Exactly. Those little things. But that inspired action that you talk about, it can be a small thing, like in every little way as well, like just kind of things that I can think about that I used to take inspired action on. I'd get like a new set of business cards printed up with like my new title or wherever I was going, just like something towards it that just kind of like fuels what you're doing, or just dream with it, just kind of play around in your mind. It's like, if you can see it there, it exists already. That's
life is images of the mind expressed. Absolutely.
It exists already. It's and then when you realize and you start to see little things turn up, I think also as well, I'd say just notice the small things, because sometimes a lot of those little small desires that you have, and then suddenly the things there on your desk, it's like, oh yeah, I wanted this, like acknowledge when it even just happens in miniature. It doesn't always have to be like the winning lottery ticket. It's like the little things that turn up that just let you know that as you think they do come in, and a lot of the time you don't see half of what you're bringing in, because there's so much to see. Your brain isn't taking in all of the information that's coming through. But
that's such an important point. That's how you bridge the gap. That's how you build manifesting momentum, is doing little things at a time. Because again, it is 100% possible to go from being homeless to think a little bit and then to become a millionaire. Possible, because nothing's impossible for God. But it's way more likely and more empowering to do the baby steps and to look for the truth of what it is that you want to manifest already existing somewhere in your life in some capacity. Because then when you say your affirmations, it doesn't feel so much like a lie. Like saying something like, I am wealthy now, is a great affirmation. Very well worded. It says it now, it affirms it. But people go, I am wealthy now, not I am wealthy now. Okay, I have $3 left. So you have to look for it somewhere in your life. I am wealthy now and I have $3. That's $3 more. And I wouldn't have, or whatever. So yeah, looking for that truth of it and knowing that it's real and trusting that it will be real is know that it's real somewhere in some version of yourself at some point.
Yeah.
That's quantum
or your wealth is all right. I am wealthy now. I've got $3 and I can eat, it might just be that.
Yes, absolutely.
Just kind of bring it into the moment. Like if we take it and be completely present, it'll be, you'll see all the things that you need are right here now. They really are, but
they really are. I truly believe that we have everything we need within us, and God always provides, and God wants you to succeed. And I just use the word God in place of the word universe, source, whatever it is that you want to use, because that's my favorite word to use. But the universe is more powerful than anything else. So nothing is impossible. Even if all of the horrible things we were talking about, the system problems, you only have $3, the class problems, all these things are as real as we want them to be, but God is stronger, right?
100%.
Yeah, always.
I've got lists of miracles. Honestly, I could go on. Maybe one day I'll kind of do like a list of miracle things that have happened to me over the years, you know.
That would be fun. I've thought about doing something similar, but paranormal experiences. Just listing them all, the weird experiences.
I've had some kind of like very like, why did that happen? You know, I got pushed out the way once and I was like, who pushed me? And then a van turned up that like I would have been under seconds later. Yeah. You know, so like little bits like that, but then other things like total absolute miracles that happen that like won't I'll be like, there's no way, you can't take that away from me seeing what's going on, you know. So yeah. But we could go on forever, but we've got more to do. More work. Just let everyone know, Sara Rae, where they can find you and connect, and if there's anything that's coming up on the horizon that people can join in with.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Carol, for having me on your podcast. I'm so glad we connected. I'm really glad to be in your energy. And I just really resonate with all that you talk about on your podcast. So thank you for letting me be a guest on your podcast. My podcast is called Spiritually Inspired. It's been going since 2020. You can find it on any of your podcast apps. We talk about manifesting, mindfulness, and magic. And Carol's going to be on there talking about creativity and spirituality. So definitely go and listen to that one soon. Also, every single week, I do a live free weekly circle, and I also do free Reiki every single week in my Facebook group. So if you're on the Facebook, you can either go to spirituallyinspired.co/free group or just search Spiritually Inspired in the Facebook group section. And you'll see me on there. Every Monday we go live and we talk about astrology for the week. We pull cards for the week and we do Reiki for the week. And then every single week we also do a separate 30-minute live Reiki share. And I've been doing this for a year now. So there's a whole bunch of them that you can go back and just get all the free healing that you need, because I believe that Reiki should be accessible to all. And I'm doing my best to make sure it's accessible. So I would really encourage you to come and join us in our free group so you can receive healing, so you can receive guidance, because none of it is random. None of it is chaotic. It's all exactly divine timed, and it's meant to be heard if you hear it. So if you feel so called to learn a little bit more about astrology, join us at our next circle. We also do moon circles too. We do guided moon rituals if that's something that interests you. Spirituallyinspired.co/free group.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carol. Yeah, it has. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sara Rae, for being part of Her Conversations, and thank you for listening. If you haven't already, I encourage you to take the Embody Her, the Embody Higher Energetic Resonance journey. It's free to join. There's a link in the show notes. And to work with me on a deeper level, there's a link in the show notes for more details of my one-to-one personalized spiritual life coaching program. You can find out more about me on my website. That's carolmaywhittick.com, carolmaewhittick.com. And you'll find me on social media platforms, Casmic on Instagram and Carol May Whittick on Facebook. So until next week, take care.